Thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the Capricorn strawberry full moon, which occurs across the 21st or 22nd of June and at 1 degree and 7 minutes. But what makes this particularly intriguing, for two reasons, is one, it's the first of two consecutive Capricorn full moons, the next on the 21st of July, but both are heavily influenced by the planet Neptune. Neptune is very much to do with what's less perceptible, but it can of course be amazing for our imagination, but also for healing. But on the first full moon, it can prove to be quite a tricky influence. On the second one, it can bring some real magic to bear. I can't wait to unpack all of that for you, but I have to say Pluto is also very important on this first full moon, and not in a particularly helpful way. Now, I'm going to share with you exactly where this event is occurring in all the major cities of the world, go through the themes of what a Capricorn full moon represents, but what makes this first one particularly unique. I'm going to share the event chart from a solar perspective that we can all relate to, but also from a natal Placidus perspective. And that has an ascendant in Taurus that's alongside Mars. So Mars on the first house, that brings a lot of energy to bear. And Mars is forging a very positive angle to both Venus and Mercury, which, like the Sun, are in Cancer. So there's a lot of energy through this first particular lunation. But stay with me, I will then go through each of the 12 signs, from Aries through to Pisces, to share with you what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have your company. If you have any thoughts, please feel welcome to share them. This is very much a community. If you're a returning visitor, as usual, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. As I've been sharing, about 50% of people who enjoy my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help the channel to grow. Click that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. Every time I share a video, you should get an update from YouTube. And just to say, I'm a consulting astrologer. If you'd like to have a direct one-to-one with me using Zoom, please see the link below where you can check out my testimonials. I don't alter these as they come in, I share them as is. Experience what other people have said about working with me. Want to get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning? You can do that too. Please see the link below. If you're a Patreon, thank you for all your support. I will upload to Patreon a free full moon factoid. Finally, if you'd like to ascend above zodiac forecast and embrace the power of natal astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, I can share with you your life roadmap report, but also your 12-month transits, how the planets in the sky are interacting with your totally unique blueprint. And there's 30% off. If you know your tropical astrology, why not check out your draconic astrology, your soul karmic chart? That can be so revealing. Please see the link below for that too. Again, 30% off. So the Capricorn strawberry full moon across the 21st and 22nd, and at 1 degree and 7 minutes. So on the screen now, I'm showing all the major cities of the world. Now, as usual, I'm basing my perspective on Greenwich, not because I'm based in the UK, but because of the prime meridian. And I'm also using universal time, not local British time. Now, in terms of a Capricorn full moon, let's just think about the sign of Capricorn. It's the sign of physical culmination, so it's where we want to showcase our physical achievements. So that can be to do with where we live, the physical structure. It can be to do with the job we have, the prestige that may have, our ambitions, our goals. And it's a very traditional sign, Capricorn. Of course, it's a cardinal sign, very much about leadership. But it's all to do with the fabric that has been well established. But Do you know the moon in Capricorn is actually debilitated? And the reason for that is the moon is opposite the sign which it rules, which of course is Cancer, where the Sun, where Venus and where Mercury are. So this is a test. And of course the moon going opposite the Sun in itself is a test because they have very different energies. So when they're opposite, they're competing. The Sun is about manifesting what we want in terms of actualizing something in a tangible way. The moon's much more to do with our environment. We can get caught up in being very attached to things, particularly when it comes to nice cars, expensive items, a little bit of luxury, because that in a way is a reflection of how society tells us we've succeeded. What the moon is about is much more to do with our progress in terms of our human journey, the way we react to people, our ability to relate, to be empathetic, to be nurturing, supportive, all the qualities that represent the moon. So we could say in some ways that this full moon is asking us to think again about some of those attachments. And are we pounding ourselves into the ground in order to achieve some kind of goal and raise our profile and receive greater recognition and acclaim because we're feeding something that's actually lacking? But as I mentioned, in the Western world, that's really what we're brought up to think is success. But success really is what we're like as human beings, how we treat other people, the respect we have for others, and being mindful of progress and having the good things in life. Nothing wrong with those things as long as we can stay available for those human relationships. So in a way, this particular full moon is asking us all to get a better balance between our attention to those physical pursuits and what's really important in terms of our inner world. So those connections to others, the people that really make us feel safe, encourage us, can applaud us in terms of our achievements, but those achievements don't have to be physical. So we may need to realign. So for example, if you're in a job which is tremendously well paid, but actually it crushes your sense of self and is a bit soulless, that's what this full moon over the next 2 weeks will ask you to think about. On the other hand, if you're rather too caught up in being very protective and your inner world, perhaps this full moon is saying to you, look, you do need to stay mindful of making progress and achieving something in the outer world which can be protective in terms of the physical and material plane, which actually is good for you emotionally, which comes through the Sun in Cancer. So there's different ways we can look at this. Now on the screen now I'm showing the event chart from a solar perspective, and of course the Sun, Venus and Mercury are all in the sign of Cancer. And the interesting thing is that the relationship between the Sun and Pluto is a quincunx, but the relationship between the Moon and Pluto is a semi-sextile. Let's just think about that Pluto quincunx, because if we think of the sign of Aquarius where Pluto is rotating backwards, that's to do with a bit of detachment. It's cool, it's an air sign. It's about how we're all connected to one another, so it can be our relationships, our friendships, our higher purpose because of the Aquarius energy, but also it can be to do with our future. But that angle to the Sun in the sign of Cancer is really discordant because the two are not working very well together. The Sun wants that nurture, and maybe we're going to encounter someone who's going to make some observations that are very to the point and penetrating, but also a little bit lacking in humanity. Now the other part of the equation is, as I mentioned before, Neptune. So Neptune's so late in the sign of Pisces, it's on the anaretic point. Obviously Neptune is coming to the end of its journey through Pisces. It's going to move into Aries next year for a while, but it will be 226 that it goes there for the long term. But it's been in the sign of Pisces since 212, but in terms of its whole journey, it is edging towards the end of a 160-year journey. So a big change is coming, but that angle is so late in the sign of Pisces, we need to imagine it as being at 0 degrees Aries, because that's how the T-square occurs. But it does still occur from its position in Pisces. It's known as a dissociate T-square, because obviously the Sun is in a watery sign like Neptune, but the angles, the Sun's so early, Neptune's so late, they're clashing. And of course, the clash is not just with the Sun, it is also with the position of the Moon. So we just need to think about what Neptune can create. In the sign of Pisces, it can give us a great desire to do good works from a spiritual viewpoint, raising our consciousness, becoming much more aware of what isn't so important from a physical viewpoint. But equally, it can be very distorting, unsettling. It's hard to get clear information. So if we are talking about our physical moves in terms of our home, whether it's a property change, having contractors in, making some improvements, or it is to do with our interface with the outer world, so dealing with an awkward boss, the Moon in the 10th house, very demanding and not very mindful of us as people, that kind of thing. Also, we can get a little bit of tension between our parents across this particular full moon, I would say. And also inside ourselves, if we do feel a little bit conflicted about what we should do about a particular situation, what happens with Neptune is that adds some mystery, but also some uncertainty. And whilst Pluto can bring, as I mentioned before, that very sharp, critical analysis of what we should do, acting it out can be much harder. But what about the event chart from a Placidus viewpoint? Well, you can see the ascendant, as I mentioned before, is at 8 degrees in Taurus, with Mars just ahead of that. So that's really good. Having Mars on the ascendant like that creates some thrust and some energy, and it is forging a terrific link with Venus and Mercury, as I mentioned. And that in itself suggests that we can keep a sense of being grounded about how we deal with this particular event. What's a little more challenging is the Sun is in house 3 and the Moon is in house 9. So that's suggesting we need to have some conversations. Those conversations could be about our immediate world, the 3rd house, but also about the big picture, our higher truth, the 9th house. And ironically, that's where Neptune can cause the most mischief. So even if we do try to be very constructive in trying to realign the classic work-life balance that a Cancer Capricorn full moon can create, Neptune's there just saying we need to really make sure that we get our facts straight. And if there is somebody who's providing some input, perhaps not necessarily what we're asking for, but there may be a sibling or a friend who sees our situation. Well, look, you've never been happy in that job. You really need to chuck it in and make yourself available for another situation. Well, that's all very well, but they wouldn't necessarily know your full situation in terms of supporting your family or perhaps your finances. Not always quite as simple as people can make out when they're providing that so-called good advice. So if there is any information coming in, anyone who's got an opinion, you will need to cut through the fog that Neptune can create, but don't become so cool and remote through that Pluto energy that you're not staying in touch with where we are. And where we are with the Sun, with Venus and with Mercury, all in Cancer, is to stay in touch with how things feel. But also the Capricorn energy is reminding us we need to be realistic. And sometimes in life it is about just aligning with some compromises. It's not 100% correct in either direction. And as we get older, life can teach us that. So this is not a time to make too quick a move, so that Mars ascendant, just caution us not to be too rash, but at the same time make sure that we do front up in terms of setting our boundaries. So if you're the person who's perhaps working hard but also coming home to find that no one else has lifted a finger, got their feet up watching the TV, then quite rightly you need to make them more conscious of what their responsibilities are. I did see something on Twitter that was very, very funny, I thought. It was a doctor, a British doctor, I think, and her Twitter, she's got a family, a young family, and on her Twitter it says, whoever uses the loo last, it's your sole responsibility to make sure that you take the empty toilet paper carton to the recycling. That really tickled me. And that's the type of thing that could come up from this. Or if you are working for people and it is a good job in terms of the remuneration, but you're not enjoying it, well, start looking for one that suits you better. If you're working from home and have been since COVID, you may find that you're being teased back into the office, and that may be something you are not enjoying. Or if you're in the office, you may find that more people are being crammed into your physical space. Cancer is about the environment, so that could be challenged as well. And in general, also, Capricorn represents big business. I think we're going to see some more stories over the next couple of weeks, but particularly about anything to do with water, water distribution, or the seas, the oceans, where perhaps the pursuit for profit has had a bad impact on our immediate environments. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. So Aries, if we think about the role of Saturn in your situation over the last year and a quarter, it's coming through your 12th house over the next year. It's really pushing you to perhaps come to terms with some things that started a long time ago, maybe 7.5 years ago on the square, maybe it was 14 or so years ago on the opposition, maybe 21, maybe further back, 28 years ago. So something has come into a close, but also Pluto's provoking a new direction. And that new direction could be really exciting. But of course, the energy in the sign of Cancer is how we feel things. It's about our sense of security. And there could be a heightened sense of security, particularly if you're not quite in the role you want professionally, or you're not living in the place you really want, or how you want in terms of your domestic situation. So the sensitivity can be high, but you kind of know there is a big shift going on. But take heart from the role of Mars, because it's on that ascendant, on the Placidus chart, forging such a dynamic link with Mercury and Venus. So you can use your drive, your passion, your determination to move forwards and work through these changes that are playing out for you. But there is a kind of paradox between the big endings that are going on and the big new beginnings, but it might not be like the celestial dust that's quite settled and you're still working it out. But keep the faith, and with Neptune, if some rather tender things do come up over the next couple of weeks, remember Neptune will come back to you on the next Capricorn full moon, which is going to occur on the 21st of July. Actually, Taurus, I think this can be a full moon that's really good for you, because I think having the ascendant through the Placidus chart and also Mars in your sign linking so passionately to Mercury and Venus gives you a head start above everyone else, because obviously Mars is about initiative in our own sign, but the position for you of the collective in Cancer is the 3rd house, so that's about ideas, but it can also be about movement. So that combination of the thrust of Mars and the speed, the death speed at the 3rd house, suggests that something exciting is in the works. But of course the moon's in the 9th house, and that's about higher truths. If you're wanting to push on with something and you're encountering someone close to you who maybe is happier to stick with what they know, that could create some tension. Also professionally, because Pluto is in your 10th house, maybe you're needing to talk with or interact with people that wouldn't necessarily be the folks you'd hang out with for an evening drink. And then Neptune, in its relationship to the situation for you, well, we need to think of that as the 12th house, really, because it's just on the edge of going into Aries. And that could mean that something could be said by you or someone that you're interacting with that could be somewhat of a surprise. But if that does happen, I think you need to take the approach of it's better out than in. And once it is out, you'll know where you stand. So there could be some important conversations over the next couple of weeks, but on the whole, I feel that that's something that can be good for you, but just be aware that someone may be resistant to that exciting energy that I think you're manifesting at the present time. So Gemini, second, 8th house full moons. Full moons, as we know, can create intensity. They can make us feel restless. It can be harder to sleep, can feel a bit more wired up. If something is a little bit out of kilter in terms of the ins and outs in your finances, the next couple of weeks can be a time to try to tackle it. But don't underestimate past skills, experiences, or even contacts. Someone could be coming back into your situation who can actually be really good for you. Mars in the 12th, linking brilliantly to your ruler Mercury, but also Venus, the planet of everyday money. And Mars itself is also in Taurus, which of course is ruled by Venus. So those past connections can be really valuable to you. But the 8th house, which is where the moon in Capricorn is, that's also where we can be most invested. If you are in a situation where you feel you're giving it everything, but somebody isn't, and that doesn't necessarily mean just financially, just in terms of that dedication to the cause, it could give you food for thought, particularly because Pluto in house 9 is applying in the quincunx to the position of the sun, making you think about the need to escape if something isn't feeling right. So if your past efforts have not felt appreciated, if you don't feel valued, that's where you may want to break out. But if someone's really showing the same amount of commitment as you, actually I think that this can be quite a progressive full moon for you. So Cancer, each full moon needs to be looked at on its own unique credentials. We can get an overall energy with a Capricorn full moon, but this specific one sees Mars in an incredibly dynamic link to Venus and Mercury in your sign. And that position for Mars for you is very much about your future. It's about your connections to people who you find exciting and stimulating. And if you are starting something fresh at this time, that energy from Mars is just really feeding into the event in a way that can cheer you on. So what about the position of the moon? Well, it's possible that someone won't be so enamored by what you're doing. Maybe it's someone that you've been close to in the past. Maybe you're developing new alliances, new interests. Perhaps you're pivoting to some fresh new direction, and that person may feel a bit bereft or left out. And particularly because Pluto's forging the quincunx to the sun in your sign, if you have been quite close to that person or had a financial relationship, if it's a business tie, that could be something that just creates some kind of shift, and that will need to be managed. And the best way to manage it is to use the diplomacy of Venus in your sign. Venus in our own zodiac sign is very much about how we are going to create our identity in some kind of more fashionable or classy way. But if you can use the energy of Venus in terms of its relating skills, and if there is something that you're making some changes around, even if it is shifts in your friendship circle, if you can be as delicate about it as possible, that's going to be a good thing to do. So Leo, the collective in Cancer is in your 12th house, which can be very reflective. It can be a time when we think very deeply about our connections to others. We could even feel hugely nostalgic, but also it can see us reflecting whether we're in the right involvement. And because Pluto is angling to the sun at that discordant 150 degrees, if there is someone who tends to be very assertive about what they want from you, but not very sensitive about some inner issues that you have or some past sensitivities, then that could jar on this event, and that could see you thinking carefully about what you want. In the most extreme cases, that could even see a relationship come to a close, but it could be a professional tie as much as a personal one, because the 12th house can be endings. The 6th house is very much to do with work, responsibilities, obligations, and of course physical health. And that's another area. If you're feeling drained at the moment, physically drained, there could be a more psychological dimension to this that you may need to bring into your thinking and how you work with it, because Neptune, very, very sensitive. It's nearly on your 9th house. Perhaps there's a part of your situation at the moment, there is a higher truth that's calling out to you, and you may need to download it and make some adaptations to your situation. And don't see your health as just being your body. You know, we are holistic beings, whether it is, you know, the trinity of physicality, the more psychological side of things, but also in terms of our beliefs and our philosophies. They're all part of what makes us whole. So do think about those things. Be very gentle on yourself, but for sure, just be aware that there could be some shifts around certain relationships just now. Virgo, the position of the Sun, Mercury, your ruler, and Venus in your 11th house, that's very much about your future. And it could be that you're thinking very carefully about your long-term plan or even your connections. The Moon, on the other hand, is the 5th house, which is about how you manifest your individual desires and needs and hopes. If you're being a bit too much of a people pleaser at this time, the Moon's pushing you to be a bit more single-minded. But that future-orientated situation might actually be, in a way, be impacted quite a lot by Pluto, because Pluto maybe challenge you around some parts of your routines, life structure, personal habits, or even a job that have been quite consistent companions for a long time. And this full moon may be asking you some questions. Do you continue on the same path, or do you try something fresh and different? And it may be some people around you are actually really cheering you on to try something different, but you may be a little bit unsure. On the other hand, there may be another sense that you're being too much of a people pleaser with certain folks in your circle, and you need to be a bit more single-minded about what you want for you. Libra, I actually feel that this can be a very positive full moon for you. I know full moons do create some uncertainty, you know, our feelings can feel quite charged up and so forth. But because Mars is in a very practical part of your situation, applying to your ruler and Mercury in your sector of success, there's a huge opportunity here to seize the moment over the next couple of weeks and raise your profile. Will this mean that at some point some of your more emotional needs won't get met due to the moon being in your 4th house? Possibly. But I don't necessarily think you should hold back. The timing of that collective in your 10th house in Cancer is so good. Even if you do feel that you're needing to make a few sacrifices, it may be still worthwhile going for it. But what about Pluto in its relationship? It is possible that if you really do want to move forwards in terms of status, getting a new job, improving your income, you may have to just be conscious that some of your more creative talents might not be quite what the potential employer or customer is looking for, and you may just need to be adaptable. If you're a natural bohemian and want to resist that because it's important that you're totally true to yourself, that would be absolutely admirable, but it may mean that you won't be received in quite the way you want. And that's how quincunxes work. They're not direct clashes, they're quite subtle. Now, in terms of the Neptunian influence, that's so near your 7th house, and that forges a T-square between the 2 points. So any communication at the moment needs to be really crystal clear. Scorpio, change is as good as a rest. And the collective in your 9th house, Cancer, which can of course be linked to very much the environment, but the seaside, being by lakes and rivers. But it just pushes you, I feel, the 9th house to just break out. But the 3rd house energies are daily routines, and of course the moon very much are emotional and domestic patterns. So maybe at the moment you're feeling excited by doing something very different, but that may need to work for what's going on at the base of your life. And because Pluto, your modern ruler, is actually in your 4th house, very much to do with home, you may feel a little bit conflicted. something may really appeal to you and seem very exciting, but there's another part of you that may want to stay safe. It just depends on your unique situation, really, how you're going to work through this. The other thing that I feel that can happen over the next couple of weeks, quite a lot of important conversations, and there may be someone who has a message to share with you. You may not necessarily want to hear it, but actually it could be a very valuable point that they have to share. For you, Sagittarius, the moon's in house 2. That's what we feel attached to. It can be our values, it can be everyday money. The 8th house, where we have the Sun, Venus and Mercury, that collective, that looks really promising, particularly because Mars is feeding into them in an area of your situation which can see you be very discriminating in terms of the details of things. So if you did want to take another look at the various costs of things that you're buying regularly, so if you go through your bank statement and just micro review all the outgoings, you could find yourself with that attention to detail and drive that Mars gives you, squeezing a bit more out of the budget, which would be really gratifying. But equally, of course, the 2nd, 8th house can be about intimacy, can be to do with where we're most invested. And if you're feeling in a relationship situation, particularly with Venus in the mix, that you're not getting that sense of fulfillment, it doesn't appear that the commitment from the other person matches what you want or need, or perhaps you're single at the moment and you're craving for that kind of deep integration in someone else's world. Just don't be too hard on yourself, because Neptune in your 4th house, very, very distorting. Saturn's been there for 1.25 years, very limiting. And Pluto in the 3rd house is asking you to keep thinking things through. But because you can be someone who potentially can be a bit resistant to commitment because you're such a freedom lover, there may be something calling out to you at the moment and over the next 2 weeks which could be a real opportunity. So don't dismiss it, but at the same time don't rush it. Now Capricorn, because there's going to be this full moon and also the full moon on the 21st of July in your sign. The first is conflicted by Neptune, the second is blessed by Neptune. Let's first of all talk about Neptune. So Neptune for you since 2012 has been giving you a fantastic imagination if you are someone who writes, or you enjoy poetry, or you paint, or you are a musician, or you use photography, or you're a filmmaker. You've probably been inspired over those years. But of course the 3rd house can be to do with relationships with our neighbours, our siblings, and there could have been at times when things felt very hazy or distorted or not very clear. Perhaps your own ideas or your own belief systems have at times felt a little opaque and shifting, not necessarily easy. So on this particular event, the collective in Cancer is so brilliant, having Venus and Mercury in your 7th house, asks you not to rush a relationship decision. If something doesn't feel quite as you want, just at the point when you're really desiring that relationship sweet spot, totally understandably, just be aware of the role that Neptune can have. And also in an existing relationship, because Pluto is in house 2 in that obtuse angle to the Sun, maybe a financial attitude or a different set of values is something that you need to discuss. But again, don't take a black and white attitude. I feel that there's more to gain from this full moon, to be honest, than there is to lose if you work with it in a delicate enough way. So Aquarius, the 6th house where the Sun, Mercury and Venus is very much to do with virtue, can be to do with health, can be to do with refinements, purity, animals, pets. Also it can be to do with our work, the way that we're very conscientious, apply, take responsibility, we turn up on time, all that kind of good stuff. So that's where you're being steered at the moment, and that can be an area of growth. Because Mars is helping Venus and Mercury, it could be around your home that you're making some changes that are working well for you. I think what the full moon's saying really in in Capricorn is just don't forget the more psychological and feeling side of whatever it is. So however or wherever you're putting your energies, what is the motive? And that's really what the moon's asking you to check out. But also, the sixth house can be quite sacrificing, and Pluto's just saying, don't be too sacrificing. Also important to stick out for what you need for you too. Pisces full moons can create challenges, but they can bring things to the surface. They're the outcome. And the outcome on this particular event can actually be very positive, because there's that array of talent in Cancer, your sister water sign. In the fifth house, that's where you can really turn up the sunshine and the charisma. It's just that the position of the moon in Capricorn is friends and connections, and Pluto being in 12, there may be someone around you, to be honest, who's a little bit jealous of the attention, the success, or the popularity that you're enjoying at the present time. Should you stop shining brightly to please someone who represents the lowest common denominator in terms of your energetic connections? No, do not give in to that. Keep shining brightly. This a unique set of influences, also blessed by the feisty energy of Mars in terms of Venus and Mercury, means that you really can buzz, but just be aware there may be someone who's not so impressed, but it's their stuff, and you should not downplay your riches, your talents, your attractiveness in order to please that jealous person. Thank you so much for joining me for the first of the two Capricorn full moon specials. Wishing you all the best over the next 2 weeks, and please, if you've yet to do so, do subscribe to the channel to help it to continue to grow.